Welcome back to Political Capital, the intersection of money and politics. Now, the Land Bank delivered its results, saying that it wants to increase its lending book from 45 billion rands to 55 billion. But just how much of that money will be used towards transformational projects? And how does the bank fund young black emerging farmers with little to their name? I sat down with the CEO, TP Nchoncho. Your CFO spoke about the need to grow your loan book to 55 billion rands. Yes. Yours is only, the Land Bank's effectiveness is only measured really through how many black emerging farmers it can get through the system. How is that coming along?
Let me explain it this way. I always say that if you look at the Land Bank Act, we actually have what I call a dual mandate. The Land Bank Act says we should support the productivity of the sector generally, and therefore we should support commercial, well-established agriculture, but at the same time support strongly the transformative, emerging developmental sector. And of course, naturally, because the entire country is transforming and seeking to be more inclusive, there is greater focus on the numbers that we are disbursing or we will be granting out to the developing or the emerging farmer sector. Now, we believe that the building blocks are as follows. One, government has to assist with a greater land availability program. The farms that government buys, they need to make them more and more available to black people for commercial production. In the second instance, technical services programs or technical services have to be brought to bear in order to provide advice and technical operations support to those who farm the land. Even the most experienced farmers in this country, on an annual basis when they begin their production cycle, they will take advice from agronomists about the soil conditions, which fertilizers to use, how best to irrigate, which best cultivars to use during any season. If they are a livestock farmer, they will take advice from veterinary scientists regarding how best to undertake their breeding programs, manage disease, and so on and so on. So those technical services programs are very key. In addition, thirdly, to providing the money that could be secured from the Land Bank or in the form of grants and a combination thereof.
Land expropriation has definitely impacted business and impacted investor sentiments. We've had less trading margins here, the JSE, roughly because investors are not quite sure what's happening with regards to the land issue. Yes. Is it showing in your books? Is there apprehension? Is that a sign in your books that says that people don't know what to make of land expropriation and are waiting to see?
I made two observations with regards to that point in my presentation today. The first observation was the summer planting season is only starting now. And so, because it is a short-term cycle season, we will see if there will be a significant take-up in the production facilities that we have available to the farmers. It will be an indicator of the level of appetite there to continue to farming and what have you. With regards to the second element, which is more long-term capital investments on the farms, in other words, buying the land, making infrastructure improvements on the land, installing electricity or irrigation systems and so on. In other words, long-term capital investment. There, it hasn't shown as yet in our books. But I'll be honest with you, the initial conversations that I've heard with some of the farmers, and I must mention it's a smaller number, there is a sense of apprehension. Because the basic question is, if I have an opportunity to expand my pack house, if I have an opportunity to increase my hectareage of nuts that I'm exporting to the Middle East or to China or to the European Union, why would I commit 10, 15-year capital if I don't have a measure of certainty regarding as to how the expropriation matter is going to pan out. So this thing is for real. So we are hoping that sooner than later, the explicit clarification that the President talked about will indeed take place so that certainty is re-established.
That's a lot of risk on your part as the bank, because you lend out money, not necessarily, you lend out money on land and also on production assets. When someone's land is taken away from them, that could leave the land bank exposed in terms of the loan that you made to such a person. How much exposure, how much risk, to the bank does land expropriation actually present?
We have made the following submission to government, and our board has been very clear about this, that point number one, the bigger problem statement that we should be dealing with and really keeping at the top of our minds here is the agenda of sustainable land reform. Obviously, expropriation comes within that context, but the real issue is, as a result of our history, black people in particular were excluded from land ownership. And this country has chosen through its constitution to embark on a land reform process. So that should be the guiding focus in our view as an organization. And if we start there are 2 points to make. One is that the institutional framework that supports land reform needs to be strengthened. I talked earlier about strengthening the land bank itself in terms of capital, strengthening the Department of Land Reform in terms of their service in land acquisition and land distribution, supporting the Department of Agriculture in the provision of those technical support services, and so on and so on. So that's point number one. Then point number two, which is your question around the risks that we face if expropriation were to be undertaken, let's say on Farm X, and that Farm X owes the land bank 100 million. What happens to the 100 million? What we have submitted is that whichever way the rights of the lenders, the rights of banks in that scenario need to be respected. Otherwise, the risk is that banks, including the land bank, would have to take the losses on their balance sheet. And at this particular point in time, the amount in the land bank is just over 41 billion rand.
That's what you would be liable for.
That we have raised from international financial institutions such as the African Development Bank, the World Bank, and the European Investment Bank, and so on, as well as local capital markets, as well as the PIC, which we have intermediated and lent out to the agricultural sector. So if we are not able to get that money back, the land bank is a state-owned institution. We would have to look to the fiscus, to the treasury, to make good on that obligation. And I don't think there is capability within the current fiscal framework to be able to do that. So in our view, the rights and the exposures of land bank and other banks, whatever dispensation is embraced around expropriation, those rights need to be respected. And we take comfort in the fact that on numerous occasions, the leadership of the country in the person of the president, as well as other policy leaders in the ruling party, as well as in the cabinet, have consistently said that this matter of expropriation will be guided by the principle that it shouldn't cause harm to the economy, it shouldn't cause harm to the agricultural sector, it shouldn't cause harm to the banking sector. So as we sit here, we have no reason to believe that decisions will be taken that will harm the well-being of the South African economy and indeed the financial services.
Thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Political Capital. We're back on your screen this Thursday at 6:30 as we continue to give you analysis of more intersections of politics and capital.